You ever had a guy come on strong text every morning, plans every weekend, and then just like that, it's like someone flipped a switch? He's still there, but the spark's gone. He used to lean, and now you're leaning forward just to feel the same energy. And you're sitting there wondering, did I do something wrong? Years ago, I coached a woman who said to me, Mathew, I don't get it. I was kind, loyal, available. I did everything right. Why did he suddenly disappear? And I said something she never forgot. You did everything right for the wrong stage of the relationship. See, attraction doesn't vanish for no reason. It fades when certain patterns, most of them unconscious, begin to shift the dynamic. And the craziest part, most women don't even realize they're doing them. They're not mistakes made out of weakness. They're made out of love, out of effort, out of hope, but they cost you everything. So today, I want to walk you through 7 subtle things that cause men to lose interest faster than you think, and how to flip the script without playing games, losing yourself, or chasing anyone ever again. There's something fundamentally destabilizing about giving too much, too soon. And I've seen this not only in relationships, but across nearly every meaningful pursuit in life, whether it's building a business, chasing a career, or navigating romance. In my 20s, I had this relentless drive to prove my worth. I overextended, over-delivered, and overcompensated, thinking that by doing more, I'd earn more. And sometimes that worked at first. But what I learned painfully, repeatedly, is that giving without boundaries isn't generosity, it's self-abandonment. And the world doesn't reward that it takes from it. This shows up in dating all the time. A woman meets a man, sees potential, and gives her time, her attention, her emotional availability. Not gradually, not in proportion to what's been earned, but all at once. It feels noble, loving, even romantic, but it's not wise. It creates a lopsided dynamic where one person is investing based on hope, while the other is still deciding whether they even want to be part of the story. When you give too early, you rob the process of discovery. You remove the challenge, the earned intimacy, the natural rhythm of reciprocation. People don't value what they haven't worked for, not because they're cruel, but because that's how the human psyche calibrates worth. Think of the difference between someone who wins a scholarship and someone who pays for a class. One feels gifted, the other earned. The same principle applies here. When a man hasn't had to show up, hasn't had to demonstrate interest, effort, or consistency, and he's already being treated like a king, he instinctively pulls back, not because he's malicious, but because the balance has been broken. If you give the reward before the effort, don't be surprised when there's no effort at all. One of the most dangerous beliefs we absorb, especially early in life, is that love must be earned through sacrifice. That if we're always available, always responsive, always there, we'll become indispensable. But let me tell you something I had to learn the hard way. Being constantly available does not make you more valuable. It makes you common, predictable, and in the harsh light of reality, people do not chase what they can always reach. Years ago, I worked with young professionals trying to build careers and relationships simultaneously. Many of them, especially the women, confused kindness with over-accessibility. They'd cancel plans, rearrange work, put their entire rhythm on pause just to be available for someone they were interested in. And they'd come to me bewildered, saying, "Why do they lose interest after I've given them everything?" The answer is brutal, but simple. You gave away your time and attention as if it were an infinite supply, when in fact, those are 2 of the rarest currencies you have. Wealth in any form is built by managing resources wisely. You don't spend everything you have the moment someone walks in and asks for it. You evaluate, you measure. You allow people to demonstrate their value before you invest further. Relationships should be no different. Your time is not an audition, it's an offering. It should be given to someone who consistently shows up, who brings something meaningful to your life, not to someone who merely asks. The person who sees that your life is full, who feels that they need to earn a space in it, is the one who steps up with intention. And when you learn to protect your rhythm, rather than abandon it, you stop attracting those who seek comfort and start attracting those who seek to contribute. Respect is born from restraint. One of the most profound lessons I've learned over the years, both personally and through observing countless relationships, is that access is a form of currency. It's not simply about who you let into your life, but when and how you let them in. In my early adulthood, I often saw myself as someone who needed to open every door immediately, thinking that showing vulnerability and sharing everything up front was the fastest way to build connection. But what I discovered was the opposite. When you give unrestricted access too soon, you dilute your own value. Think about it like this. In any business or creative endeavor, you don't give away your trade secrets on the first meeting. You build trust, demonstrate your worth, and allow others to earn their place in your inner circle. Relationships follow the same principle. If a man feels like he can walk right into every part of your world without effort, he won't value it. But if there's a sense that this access must be earned through respect, consistency, and genuine interest, that's when attraction deepens. I recall a close friend who, early in dating, shared every detail of her life on the first date, her past struggles, her deepest fears, and her entire social circle. The man was overwhelmed, not because he didn't care, but because he hadn't been given a chance to build a foundation for that level of intimacy. Contrast that with another friend who revealed pieces of herself gradually, allowing her partner to discover her in layers. The relationship grew organically, with respect and curiosity fueling the connection. The key is not to withhold out of fear or manipulation, but to honor the natural pace of connection. When you let him earn access, you maintain your power and invite him to show he's worthy of it. True closeness is built on earned trust, not given freely. There's a natural rhythm to all meaningful things, relationships included. I've often found that people, especially early in their 20s and 30s, rush to the finish line as if speed equates to success. But what I've learned through my own experience and watching others is that pacing isn't just about waiting, it's about timing your investments of energy, attention, and emotion so that they align with what's truly being built. When I was younger, I remember rushing into partnerships, whether in business or personal relationships, without fully understanding the foundation beneath. I'd dive headfirst, fueled by excitement and hope, only to find that the other person wasn't quite ready for that level of commitment. It felt like I was sprinting while they were still warming up. That mismatch created pressure and confusion. It wasn't sustainable. Attraction grows when there's space to breathe, when curiosity isn't extinguished by giving everything away too soon. Imagine a story if the ending is spoiled in the first chapter. What's left to discover? The same applies to emotional investment. When you pace yourself, you allow the connection to unfold naturally. You give both people room to show up authentically, to build trust, and to deepen interest gradually. This is not about playing games or withholding your true self. It's about respecting the process. It's about recognizing that rushing can actually push someone away because it forces them to make decisions before they're ready. A friend of mine once told me she learned the hard way. She wanted to fast forward a relationship because she feared losing him, but the result was the opposite. He felt overwhelmed and withdrew. Real attraction is built on timing, not urgency. When you master pacing, you create a magnetic pull that lasts. There's a misconception that needing someone, craving their attention or approval, is somehow a sign of love. But neediness is not love. It's a signal, a red flag that something deeper within you requires attention. Early in my career, I encountered this dynamic both personally and professionally. I watched talented, passionate individuals, myself included at times, pour their energy into others, seeking validation in ways that left them depleted. It was like trying to fill a bottomless well. The more they gave, the emptier they felt. In relationships, neediness often shows up as constant texting, seeking reassurance, or an overwhelming fear of losing the other person. But when you lean on someone else to maintain your emotional balance, you aren't creating connection, you're creating pressure. I remember a close friend who was in a whirlwind romance. She was so afraid of losing her partner that she sought his constant approval, questioning every silence and every delayed response. The man eventually felt suffocated, not because he didn't care, but because he was being asked to manage emotions that weren't his responsibility. True love is not rooted in dependence. It's rooted in strength. Strength to be whole on your own, to sit with uncertainty, and to trust that your worth doesn't hinge on someone else's attention. This doesn't mean you don't care or you don't show up. It means you care enough about yourself to recognize when you're giving from a place of fear rather than genuine affection. When you pause and address your neediness, you reclaim your power. You shift from seeking to attracting. And that's the foundation of a lasting, meaningful connection. There's a psychological cost to chasing clarity that most people underestimate. The more you pursue immediate answer back times, labels, intentions, the more you distract yourself from the only clarity that actually matters, the one found through consistent observation. I've seen this not just in dating, but across every domain of life. When I was younger, I wanted certainty so badly I'd push conversations before they were ready, force partnerships before trust was earned, and demand answers that hadn't yet had the time to form. What I ended up doing was scaring people off, not because of who I was, but because of how urgently I needed to know. You don't find real understanding by interrogating a situation. You find it by watching, not passively, but intentionally. In relationships, this means letting someone show you who they are, over timeno, clinging to every text or silence as if it's a final verdict. I've coached people who would spiral the moment someone pulled back slightly. They'd assume the worst and respond from panic. And inevitably, the connection would unravel not because the relationship was broken, but because it was never given room to breathe. Clarity is earned through patience, not pressure. When you observe instead of chase, you begin to notice patterns. Does this person follow through? Are they consistent in effort, in presence, in tone? Do their words align with their actions? These patterns tell you far more than any forced conversation ever could. Observation is how you filter noise from truth. It's how you protect your emotional investment without stifling the natural rhythm of a connection. Sometimes the answer you're looking for is already in front of you. You just haven't been still enough to see it. I've come to believe that the root of respect, true, lasting respect, doesn't come from demanding it. It comes from living it. People don't treat you how you ask to be treated. They treat you according to how you treat yourself. And I've seen this play out not only in personal relationships, but in professional settings, academic circles, and friendships. In my early teaching years, I noticed something striking. The students who respected their own learning, who held themselves to a standard, those were the ones other students listened to. Not because they shouted the loudest, but because their posture said, I take myself seriously, and so should you. In relationships, this principle becomes even more vital. A woman who values her time, who honors her own boundaries, and who doesn't contort herself to fit someone else's expectations, communicates something powerful without saying a word. She's not harsh. She's not guarded, but she knows what she stands for. And the irony is, the very act of holding those boundaries, of not over-explaining, over-apologizing, or overcompensating is what earns genuine respect. I remember watching someone close to me constantly compromise her values for the sake of keeping the peace. She was kind, deeply giving, and endlessly patient. But the more she bent, the less she was appreciated. Eventually, she began to resent the very people she was trying to please. And the moment she began choosing herself not with bitterness, but with quiet, certain everything changed. The respect she had been chasing came rushing in the moment she stopped needing it. Respect from others begins the moment you stop negotiating your worth. One of the most dangerous things you can do in the early stages of a relationship or any connection is abandon your rhythm. That unique pulse of your life, the structure and meaning you've built around your values, your goals, your passions. I've seen it happen repeatedly. People meet someone who excites them, and suddenly their priorities shift. They skip the gym, delay their work, cancel plans with friends, not because they've changed who they are, but because they think love demands that kind of sacrifice. It doesn't. I've lived this in my 20s. I fell into this exact trap. I was so captivated by someone's attention that I adjusted my schedule, reshaped my routines, and lost sight of the very things that made me feel alive. At first, it felt like connection. But what I later realized is that I had stopped listening to myself. The music of my life had been replaced by the noise of trying to maintain someone else's interest. That imbalance didn't create intimacy, it bred quiet resentment, both ways. And eventually, it collapsed. When you stay rooted in your rhythm, you tell the world, this is who I am, and this is what matters to me. You allow someone to step into a life that already has structure, joy, momentum, not a blank space waiting to be filled. That's what draws people in. Not desperation or over-availability, but the power of someone who knows how to move with purpose, even when no one's watching. You don't create love by dropping your rhythm, you attract it by dancing to it without apology. Security is not something you receive, it's something you generate. And the moment you outsource it to another person, you hand over control of your emotional well-being. I've watched this dynamic unfold time and time again. People enter a relationship hoping someone else will stabilize their fears, eliminate their doubts, and provide constant reassurance. But that kind of dependence doesn't create closeness. It creates pressure. And pressure is the very thing that erodes intimacy. In my own life, I've seen how dangerous it is to make someone else the foundation of your inner peace. Years ago, I was in a relationship where, without realizing it, I started relying on her responsa, mood, her tone, her presence to regulate how I felt about myself. If she was warm, I felt worthy. If she was distant, I questioned everything. And what I didn't understand at the time was that this kind of dynamic isn't love its instability masquerading as connection. I was asking someone else to carry a weight that I hadn't learned to carry myself. When you make a man responsible for your sense of security, even unconsciously, he begins to feel more like a lifeguard than a partner. His attention becomes a life raft instead of a gift. And eventually, that weight becomes unsustainable. True connection is built when two whole people meet not, when one person fills the gaps the other hasn't faced yet. Emotional self-reliance is not about closing off. It's about showing up with your center intact. So love becomes something shared, not something depended on. Because the love that lasts is the love that's chosen, not the love that's needed for survival. Attraction, real and enduring attraction, doesn't thrive in heaviness. It doesn't come from emotionally loaded conversations too early, or constant questioning, or the feeling that someone's happiness depends entirely on your next move. What draws people in, what keeps them returning, is a sense of lightness, the emotional tone of ease, curiosity, presence. And that lightness isn't accidental. It's something you have to protect, cultivate, and value. I remember working with a young couple years ago, intelligent, kind people, but their relationship kept collapsing under the weight of emotional intensity. Every interaction was dissected, every text analyzed, every quiet moment turned into a crisis. What started as passion became pressure. What should have been connection became calculation. Eventually, it was unbearable. Not because there wasn't potential, but because everything felt heavy. There was no room left to breathe. I've been there too. I've had moments in my own life where I brought too much seriousness into something too early, trying to make things real before they had time to be natural. And it never worked. Because people don't fall in love with burden. They fall in love with energy, vitality, presents the sense that being with you adds something to their life, not that it becomes a job to maintain. The wealth of any relationship comes from the emotional space it lives in. When you create an environment where the other person feels safe to relax, to laugh, to be themselves without constant performance or defense, you give the connection a chance to grow. That doesn't mean ignoring problems or pretending things are fine. It means recognizing that heaviness should never be the foundation. Let it breathe, let it build, let it feel good. Because no one stays where everything feels like a task, but they stay where they feel alive. If there's one thing I want you to walk away with, it's this. Lasting connection isn't built through overgiving, overthinking, or over-explaining. It's built through grounded self-respect, emotional clarity, and the quiet confidence of someone who knows their value without needing to prove it. When you stop chasing love and start embodying it, everything shifts. The right person doesn't need to be convinced they'll recognize the strength in your presence and rise to meet it. So protect your energy, honor your rhythm, and let love meet you where you are, not where you sacrifice yourself to be.